3 weeks after the event of Split, David Dunn, played once again by Bruce Willis, is in pursuit of Kevin Wendell Crumb, played once again by James McAvoy, in a series of encounters when they are both captured and taken to a research facility of sorts for the criminally insane, where Elijah Price, aka Mr. Glass, played once again by Samuel Jackson, is also being held. As all three men are forced to endure multiple psychological evaluations and procedures, Mr. Glass acts as an orchestrator who holds secrets critical to both men. So this is my third most anticipated movie of 2019, right behind Godzilla King of the Monsters and my most anticipated movie of the year, Avengers Endgame. Unbreakable is one of my favorite movies of all time, and Split is one of the biggest surprises in terms of my overall enjoyment of a movie I've had in a really long time. And I gotta tell you, I went through several nerdgasms. I tell you, several nerdgasms the moment David Dunn from Unbreakable showed up at the end of Split, revealing that Split is actually secretly a sequel to Unbreakable. What a twist. I was ridiculously pumped for Glass, partly because we were finally getting a sequel to Unbreakable, but also the fact that I just really wanted to see the characters from Unbreakable meet the characters from Split, and I was really interested to see how M. Night Shyamalan would handle that crossover. After seeing Glass, I can say that I liked it. I really like this movie, but I still have issues with it. This review is going to have spoilers in it because I don't think it's possible for me to even talk about this movie without at least spoiling something. So from this point on, I'm going to go in full spoilers. You've been warned. Firstly, the characters. They are so awesome! It was so cool to see Bruce Willis and Samuel Jackson reprise these roles, especially considering they play it so dang well. I like seeing what David Dunn has been doing since we last saw him in Unbreakable. The scene near the beginning where he's going after those two dudes who are recording acts of violence purely for YouTube views is so chilling and atmospheric. We don't even entirely see what he does to these two guys. He chucks one of them against the wall, and then we see Dunn just slowly walk up to the other guy, and then nothing. That's perfect. It's a great way to reintroduce us to this character, and it perfectly sets up the tone for the rest of this movie. I also love the stuff between David and his son, played once again by Spencer Treat Clark. I thought the interactions between these two characters were great because it was like the relationship between Batman and Oracle, only this time they were father and son. Their chemistry is just as good as it was 19 years ago, and the way they bounce off each other just boosted the likability of these characters to 1,000,000%. I just wish we got more of it. This is the best performance Bruce Willis has given in years, and he's actually not in the movie as much as you'd think. In fact, I'd say out of all three of the main characters, David Dunn actually gets the least amount of screen time. There are entire sections of this movie where he's nowhere to be seen. He's so sidelined in this movie that he feels underdeveloped. For example, we learn that his wife, Audrey, is dead. We hear about it once or twice, and then it's completely forgotten about. Aside from one scene, we never truly see how that loss has affected him, or even his son for that matter. With that said, while I take issue with David's lack of screen time, I can see why this was done. David Dunn's story has technically already been told. We know almost everything there is to know, e.g. being the last survivor of the East Rail 117 crash, etc. Although Mr. Glass himself is in Unbreakable, we all know that, we don't actually learn of all the terrible things he's done or even that he's a bad guy till the very end. And the same could be said for Kevin Wendell Crumb in this sense. Yeah, we got a whole movie centered on this character, but A, we never actually saw every single one of the 23 identities living inside Kevin's body, and B, the Beast, the most powerful of the identities, doesn't show himself until the film's climax. So while limiting David's screen time can be seen as a detriment, it could also be seen as a necessary sacrifice because it gives the other two characters more time to grow and develop, allowing the audience to become just as, if not more, accustomed to these characters than David. Also, it's not like the Horde and Mr. Glass scenes aren't interesting. In fact, throughout most of this movie's runtime, I was just enthralled, and a large part of that is due to the characters. This movie was Samuel Jackson's time to shine, and holy mother of Spagbol, he killed it. Mr. Glass is one of the best performances to come out of Samuel Jackson, and to see him finally return to this role was magnificent. When we first see him, he really doesn't say much, like at all. And we're led to believe that he's in this almost catatonic state due to poor treatment at the last hospital he was at. But when it's revealed that he's been faking it the whole time and starts roaming around the facility at night, messing with all the cameras and equipment, I'm like, yup, he's back. We finally got a true sense of what Mr. Glass is actually capable of in this movie. There's an incredible scene where he's in the patient property room where the Beast is just killing this guy, and Mr. Glass is just sat there watching and almost smiling, which makes him so much more intimidating, not just because he's a mastermind and the power he has over certain characters, but also because he's actually enjoying watching this dude suffocate to death. I was worried because the trailers made it look like Kevin Wendell Crumb would basically become Mr. Glass's henchman and basically do everything for Mr. Glass. That wouldn't have worked because it would have made Mr. Glass look completely useless, but thankfully Shyamalan didn't go in that direction. He comes up with a plan to get out. He gets technical and messes with all the cameras to mask what he's actually doing, and he pretty much orchestrates everything so that it plays out in his favor. The movie even ends with his plan coming to fruition. More on the ending later. The scene where Mr. Glass and Kevin actually meet for the first time, where he's trying to convince the Beast to show himself and that his powers actually mean something, is so powerful because it perfectly captures and emphasizes the power that a mastermind like Mr. Glass can have over someone. While both Willis and Jackson are exceptional, it's actually James McAvoy who ends up stealing the whole show. Watching McAvoy changing his posture, his mannerisms, facial expressions, and especially his voice as he rapidly shifts between the different identities is a mind-bending experience. His best scene from a performance perspective is when Sarah Paulson is using these hypnotic lights in order to bring out all the different identities one at a time. It's not only McAvoy's incredible performance that makes these scenes incredible. It's also the idea that we're seeing this guy at the mercy of someone else. In Split, Kevin, the Beast, or the Horde, whatever you want to call him, had complete control of the situation. Those girls were at his mercy for almost the entire runtime. This time, that scenario is flipped on its head. And just like that, the kidnapper becomes the kidnapped. You know, that sounded a lot cooler when I was thinking about it. This character is written and performed so remarkably that he quickly became my favorite character. Glass, like any movie, has a 3-act structure, only this time it's more like it's a 3-movie structure. The first is about David Dunn, then David Dunn is sidelined, and the second is about Kevin Wendell Crumb. And the third act, as you may have guessed, is about Mr. Glass. Structuring the movie in this way is a good way of giving each character their own section of the movie where they can truly shine. But with that said, I think one of the reasons a lot of people were disappointed with this movie is because it feels less like an Unbreakable sequel and more like a Split sequel. Yeah, Mr. Glass is a big part of this movie. The second half of his name is the frickin' title. But it's actually James McAvoy that gets the most screen time. It's interesting that Shyamalan went in that direction because when Split came out, I remember the main conversation not being the fact that it was a good movie, which it definitely is. I remember the main conversation being the fact that it was tied into Unbreakable. I do like what we got, don't get me wrong, but I would say that the Unbreakable elements of this movie should have been just as, if not more prominent, because then that would mean that everyone gets an equal amount of screen time, and the movie would feel like an Unbreakable and a Split sequel instead of just a Split sequel with Unbreakable characters in it. Glass is a very slow-paced movie, particularly when these characters get to the psychiatric ward, and I have no issue with that. It's one of the reasons I love Unbreakable so much, because it builds things slowly and it allows you to observe small moments that further develop its plot and characters. So it was awesome to see that slow pacing make a comeback in Glass. I think having all these characters being kept in a psychiatric ward being treated for what Sarah Paulson's character sees as an illness is a really interesting idea. In Kevin Wendell Crumb's case, he has DID, aka Dissociative Identity Disorder, and one of those identities, that being the Beast, is really powerful and can climb on walls, bend steel, and take shots from a freaking shotgun! David Dunn, who believes he is super strong and immune to many things like illness, but water is his primary weakness, and then obviously we have Mr. Glass, who sees himself as a mastermind and believes he is the opposite to David in pretty much every way. Here they are put together in a confined space where they are pitted against each other psychologically and forced to become part of a mind game. One of my favorite scenes from Glass is when Sarah Paulson has all 3 of them in this room, where she talks to all 3 of these characters individually to try and dissect their thought process and what's going on in their heads to try and convince them that they aren't what they think they are. It's a weird and intriguing scene because you're watching characters who are 110% sure of themselves slowly begin to doubt themselves. Patricia is arguably one of the most powerful opposing and dominant identities within Kevin's body, and to see her break down in this scene is almost heartbreaking because she spent her entire existence believing that the Beast is real and that he can do all of these incredible things, only to be faced with the possibility that maybe he's not even anywhere near that powerful. Yes, there are a lot of really powerful scenes, but I really don't like the twist that there's this secret society of people who want to eradicate superheroes from the Earth to keep things balanced. It's an interesting idea, I'll give it that, but it's executed so unrealistically. I mean, these guys literally all sit in this restaurant, wait for everyone who's not a cult member to leave, and then they get right into cult business. I mean, why couldn't they just meet in an abandoned warehouse or even have like a secret headquarters? You know, seeing as how you're trying to keep yourselves hidden from the public. Idiots. There's also a few little plot holes that bugged me. I love the scenes with Kevin and the lights. That stuff is some of the best in the entire movie, and the idea that the beast is being restrained by the light is really smart. But there are identities in Kevin's body that are incredibly smart, most notably Dennis and Patricia. One of them should have realized that they could have just covered their eyes and break out of the door, but it's never really explored. As for the ending, well, I got mixed feelings. On one hand, it's incredibly anticlimactic because after everything these characters go through, they just die. David gets drowned in a puddle, Kevin gets shot, and Mr. Glass gets killed by the Beast. I just wish there was a little more than just David reaching out and touching Sarah Paulson's hand, realizing what's going on, and then just dying like that. On the other hand, we're sort of made to agree with the villains, and Mr. Glass's plan to reveal all these superhuman people to the world comes to fruition, and it's viewed as this beautiful moment where now other people can now come out and say, yeah, I'm one of these guys. And then that would lead to a revolution, which was Mr. Glass's idea. However, I wish that the movie had ended on a much more heartbreaking note, because it's just strange portraying something on such a hopeful note when it's the villain's plan that's come to fruition here. The main villain of this trilogy. But I do love that the ending plays along with the rest of the movie and doesn't play it safe. And I have to respect M. Night Shyamalan for trying his hardest to not play it safe. M. Night Shyamalan directed this movie beautifully. I love the use of the colours in terms of lighting and the costumes, as well as the clothing that these characters wore. For starters, the colour yellow represents Kevin, with David getting darkish green, and Mr. Glass getting purple, and I loved how those colours appeared to be representing essential aspects of who these characters were. I also thought the action was really well done. It's nothing like Mission Impossible or Captain America the Winter Soldier, where everyone's an expert fighter and can do all these crazy moves. The fight scenes in this are essentially people punching and shoving each other and occasionally throwing things and people, but I love that because it fits with the grounded and realistic tone of this movie, as well as the rest of this trilogy. Deleted scenes from Unbreakable are actually used in this movie, and it really adds to the development of these characters and adds an extra layer of depth, particularly for David and Elijah. The scene where young Elijah is at the theme park where he's on the ride and he breaks all those bones is horrifying, and it makes you feel so much more sympathy for Elijah because of all the things this man went through as a child. They also explain something that really confused me in Split. In Unbreakable, M. Night Shyamalan himself has a cameo as this drug dealer in the football stadium, and then in Split he reappears as a security camera operator, and I kept wondering to myself, are these two the same people, or is that just a little continuity error? But in Glass he has a cameo where it's actually revealed that it's the same guy, and I thought that was just a really clever way of connecting the trilogy even more and making the timeline feel more fleshed out. Overall, while I do have issues with Glass, I liked it way more than I disliked it. Yeah, there are things that I wish were executed better, and I really think David Dunn should have had way more screen time than he got. But like I said at the beginning, for a large majority of this movie, I was enthralled. I really hope that we get more movies like this trilogy that are just completely out there and original. Movies that don't give a dang about people playing it safe. I think Glass, as well as this entire trilogy, is a really unique spin on the superhero genre as a whole, and I've enjoyed pretty much all three of these movies. So with that said, Glass gets a 7.9 out of 10. So those are my thoughts on Glass. I do hope you enjoyed this video. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And once again, I would just like to thank you for watching. But before I go, I would just like to ask you guys, what did you think of Glass? Did you think it was good? Did you think it was bad? Did you think it was somewhere in the middle? Please leave your thoughts down in the comments below, and I will indeed see you guys in the next one. Until next time, see you around.